HOA hired a contractor who put cement down our toilet, and the HOA is now distancing themselves from the problem and saying it's between us and the contractor. I own a home in a community with a homeowners association. Our area doesn't have city water and instead has a shared well. There are meters in homeowner basements, and we periodically report the numbers to the HOA, who charges us for water usage based on local rates. Recently, the HOA purchased new smart meters and hired a contractor to install them. So we had to let them into our homes to turn off the water, switch out the meter, turn the water back on. Meanwhile, they also gave this contractor a list of a few random repairs in the neighborhood to also handle. After the contractor left our home, we found a couple days later that our plumbing was not working correctly. A lot of money later, a plumber told us there is cement in our pipes and septic system. This seemed very related to the fact that the HOA had them fix a small section of the curb in front of our house. We went down the block to the contractor and asked them what the heck they did, and they just said it was just disposing of the extra cement and not to worry because it gets filtered out at the treatment plant. Except we aren't on city water and sewer where our waste goes to a treatment plant, we're on septic, and that cement has now clogged our pipes, and the plumber believes it has damaged our septic system. The contractor came over and poked around for several hours. The three of them had a loud argument, and then they left. They've apparently stopped showing up to the appointments in the neighborhood for meter replacements. So, the prevailing theory is that they realized they messed up and ran away. Meanwhile, now the plumbing company worked on it for 2 days, hoping they could get resolved on it without doing anything crazy, but they haven't made much progress. They're now at the point where they say they will need to cut out and replace affected areas of pipe, which could be a little or could be a lot. They are bringing in a septic company to consult on the septic system side of things. We have been in constant contact with the HOA since they are the ones that contracted with this company. They're trying to wash their hands of it, saying that we'll have to directly sue the contractor. Meanwhile, the contractor seems to be something of a fly-by-night operation. From what I'm hearing, they were the lowest bid the HOA got for this work. They are from out of town, and the HOA doesn't have any real information other than the very common names of 2 guys and a phone number that's now going to voicemail. The HOA did not get any proof of insurance or anything else like that, and we cannot find any real information about their business. So the meat of my question, it feels like trying to go after this contractor is barking up a dead tree. The HOA, in my opinion, seems equally responsible because they hired an unvetted contractor. But I'm not sure if my opinion concurs with the legal opinion. We haven't talked to a lawyer just yet. We're not sure if the cost to fix this will come in above or below small claims threshold. Do you agree with this? You need to talk to a licensed attorney who specializes in construction issues. You'll likely need to go after both the HOA and the contractor. Without knowing more specifics of the arrangement between you and the HOA and how the contractor was hired, the contractor worked for the HOA. The contractor damaged your property, so you clearly have a claim against them. The reason you need to likely go after the HOA is that they should be carrying insurance to cover common area issues. This is one of those sorts. Yes, you are a member of the HOA, but the HOA is itself an actor. They also have the relationship with the contractor. They did the hiring and should have done due diligence in hiring them. It appears they did not. At the end of the day, this is a more complex matter and really isn't something this place is best for. You really have a lot of extra information, but a good attorney will break through this and get to the heart of the matter. The person you need to speak to needs to be well versed in disputes with contractors and real estate matters. They should also understand how HOAs work. You don't want to pay for someone to learn on the job, and this is the kind of thing that any attorney will take, but will cost you more with someone who isn't their specialty, because they'll need to catch up on your dime. What would you do if you get somebody that knows what they're doing? They might have dealt with something like this before, but I don't know, this is a crazy situation. Cement in the septic? Jeez, what would you do? Don't bother you at all tonight? Alright, posted by Mr. Gaff. So this is a fun little story from my last job working in a vegetarian and vegan food factory. It was the worst job you can imagine. The place smelled like rotting food at all times. The employees rarely ever do anything to prevent spreading illnesses. They would regularly show up sick even during the pandemic, and management was just the worst. I quickly adopted the policy of doing the least irritating job that I could find and trying to avoid listening to my shift lead since he was a jerk. For the sake of the story, let's call the shift lead Jim. Jim was a by-the-numbers guy, to the point that if you argued with him using logic, he would instead tell you that you're wrong, and his math, yes, he would point out that phrasing very deliberately, was what they were going to use, and to not think above your pay rate. So on this particular night, I worked from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m., Jim decided he wanted to be really lazy since the building owner was going to be gone for the week and he wouldn't have to report anything to him for days. He spent his whole night just sitting in the office playing games on his phone, ignoring our calls because we needed assistance. After about 8 or 9 p.m. rolled around and me finally getting ticked off enough to care, I asked my department manager if he could cover for me for just a couple minutes to get Jim in there to help. We needed him to go get maintenance because the machine sealing a product called tempeh was barely sealing any at all, and we were throwing away about 70-80% of all packages. I get into his office, and before I can say a single word, Jim says very loudly, "Whatever it is, I don't care. Just leave me alone tonight." I tried to get in a word, but he just glared at me and said, "Just get the heck out and don't bother me again." Then an evil thought crossed my mind. Cue the malicious compliance. "You just want me to not bother you, Jim? Or does that mean everyone?" I asked, and he says the words that screwed him over. "As long as I'm not bothered, I don't care." "All right," I say, and I leave with the grin that most anime villains dream of doing. I get to my department manager and I tell him that Jim doesn't want to be bothered at all tonight. My manager looks at me, kinda confused at first, and asks what the heck does that mean, to which I just told him Jim doesn't care what happens as long as no one bothers him. Me putting a big emphasis on the last part. Now, my department manager was the guy you go to for getting information around the build fast. He's a fast talker and quick on his feet. He lets me get back into my spot and very quickly starts darting around to each department to inform them of what transpired. Needless to say, Jim wasn't bothered at all the entire night. He even had to be waking up at 3 a.m. to do his nightly paperwork because he fell asleep. During the night, the machines packaging the soy hot dogs also started sealing poorly, but we couldn't get any maintenance out until it's been approved by Jim, so we just ran it all night. By the end of the night, my line, I worked in the boxing department boxing up the tempeh, had thrown away roughly 4 tons of tempeh. We used large red buggies that would hold at least 500 pounds, and we chucked 17 of those suckers. I won't even try to count up the dogs that were thrown out too. Needless to say, this was going to hit the company hard. The fallout. Next day, my shift comes in, and to no one's surprise, Jim is on my butt right away. "Why didn't you inform me that we were losing so much product?" He starts screaming into my face. "The owner looked at his email and saw that we lost nearly $15,000 in product alone last night." I simply smiled at Jim, and I said to him, "Well, I would have said something, but you told me not to bother you all night." Jim, realizing he could be in trouble for this, doubles down on trying to blame me. "You had a duty to tell me even if it's against my orders," he shouts. I calmly put my helmet on and collared coat, smile, and say, "Sorry, I didn't think because it was above my pay grade." And then I went out onto the floor quite happy that I knew he was either going to be in a crap ton of trouble or fired. Sadly, he wasn't fired, only in trouble. His position was nearly up for grabs, and he had to work every day for 6 months after that, with only Sundays off, before they eased up on him. Did he learn from this? No, he was still a total jerk that the whole staff generally acted nice to, but hated with a passion. Not gonna give me a meal benefit? I'll eat at the office then. Posted by K. Grant. Some backstory from a few years back. I was working on healthcare as a HTA nurse, which around here is a nurse which travels around the city area doing health assessments which don't require a 112 call or 911, which is reserved for emergency and paramedics who handle those cases. My job was essentially picking up the jobs, which do not require immediate response, and try to treat the patient either at home or, if not possible, give instruction where they can get treatment for whatever was the ailment at that time. It was a job to assist people so they wouldn't come to the ER with small injuries or illnesses which can be handled in the regular healthcare center next working day. Also, the other part was to go around and treat patients which had had, for example, IV treatments regularly and administer the fluid treatment, the drugs, painkillers, ABs, and so on. My issue was that I noticed that as we drove around the large area from one patient to another, we had to stop for a lunch at some point and that we had to pay lunch from our own pocket, whatever it cost. This is common practice. For example, paramedics, they eat when they can, and usually at some gas station or so, somewhere where they currently are and have time to eat. I usually read the contracts pretty carefully, which comes from my previous career as an engineer, where I had to make foolproof contracts and avoid stepping on traps. And our healthcare union had negotiated that if your work requires X amount of traveling, you should be entitled for tax-free meal benefit. I wasn't completely sure about it, if that particular statement would apply for the job that I was doing, but I decided to ask stupid questions about it, and eventually forced my supervisor to contact the management to get a statement for the issue at hand. From the management, it went to the legal department, and they begun to delve into it, and it lasted for weeks, since they couldn't quite deny it outright, but they eventually came to a conclusion that it couldn't be applied to the job which I had. I was a little annoyed at this, but I decided to not contest it any more than that. But another statement which union had negotiated for us was that if we have an office or a station and a social space where to warm up your meal, so like a microwave, coffee maker, and so on, we are entitled to have a lunch break of 30 minutes per day at the regular office where I leave every morning. Just a normal thing, which, if backed by the law as well around here, lunch is holier than holy if one can say so. I mentioned earlier that our area was rather large, so if I was working on northern parts, for example, it could take some 2 hours driving there, spend 4 hours with patients around that area, and then drive back to the station in an 8-hour shift. So I agreed with the bosses that I'd drop the issue with the meal benefit and I'll eat at the office instead, and they agreed on this, and I got it in written email that I could do that. So, not every day, but a few times a week when I was assigned to some faraway area, I jumped into the car, drove there, did maybe one patient call, then I had to hurry up back so I can begin my lunch break, then eat for 30 minutes, and drive back to do another patient and drive back. That's an awful lot of driving and wasted time. Eventually, I was confronted about this, and I explained that because I can't afford to eat lunch every day, I just have to eat my own cooking at the office, and that as we don't have the meal benefit, I'm practically forced to drive back and forth so that I can have my prescribed by law lunch break. They were dumbfounded at first, but they could not squirm out of it at all. Problem was that the common practice had been for God knows how long that paramedics and such just went along and paid their own meals, as they never knew better. They had always had the possibility to go back to the station to eat, and I'm quite sure that we all were entitled for that meal benefit, since it is prescribed by law and union agreements in a way that if you can't eat in a regular way at the office, you're entitled for the meal benefit instead. But no one had really contested it earlier. So they were dumbfounded and asked me not to do it in the future, but I responded to that are they going to get the meal benefit running for the department or not? Because if they are not going to do it, I am entitled to eat at the station. The discussion went on a while longer on the subject, but eventually they caved in. They arranged the meal benefit for every nurse and paramedic on the department, as they couldn't find a way out otherwise and couldn't have us driving back and forth and not performing our job. Have me work throughout the pandemic, promote me, and then don't accommodate my disability? You can pay my short-term disability insurance for that. Posted by Random Cashier 75. Let me do a little backstory first. I started working at Walmart before the COVID-19 pandemic happened as a full-time apparel employee. I happened to have grand mal epilepsy that started in my mid-20s, around 2015. I'm also quite understanding of other people's disabilities and often try to work with them since I can relate to having issues. So for example, I use hand gestures and/or writing for deaf coworkers. This helps with basic communication that most hearing people don't bother with, and it's normally appreciated that I do this. I got to stay in that exact same position throughout 2020 and part of 2021. Naturally, I had to still go to work as an essential employee, deal with the anti-masking idiots, and worry about both of my parents who also work in retail. I managed to get myself promoted to the digital shopping department by transferring stores and pointing out certain key skills that I have that are, well, really useful for retail in 2021. I had politely asked for the minimal requirements for my department manager of 1. Being able to take medication at work, and 2. Not having to bring orders out to cars because I lack what's known as an aura. Basically, summed up here, I can't sense seizures coming. Though I don't have them very often due to medication, a grand mal plus a busy parking lot at work seems like a bad idea. My department manager agreed to this condition as long as I did other work to help out the digital team instead, which was completely reasonable to ask for in my opinion. So as per the request for a lot of the closing shifts that I'd work, I'd take up phone duty, pre-set up the orders to go out, and or do returns for the department. The issue here was the personal department person. She kept forgetting about my condition repeatedly over the next year. Now this was despite me bringing in medical notes from my neurologist for my file, pointing this out more than once on why I shouldn't be scheduled solo, and having the department manager talk to her. Now after over a year, she scheduled me completely solo for a closing, which I noticed and texted my department lead about. I did the official suggestion of hers, despite my thoughts that corporate Walmart was likely even dumber than her on basic disabilities. I only asked for the exact same things that I asked my department manager for, both very, very logical and minimal accommodation requests. As I suspected, Walmart's Sedgwick said, "We can't do this unless you change departments." All departments suggested either wouldn't work due to time and or location, or they were back at the same level as apparel, which would lower my position and pay. Sedgwick put me on an automatically placed LOA, leave of absence, after a few days without my permission. This was, quote, to allow me to figure out what I should do, end quote, over the next 4 months. I called up and I asked the Walmart Benefit Center about this. As of late 2019, Walmart signed all of their employees up for a free to the employees short-term disability insurance without officially telling them. I filed to get this insurance to pay for my entire LOA, politely explained my situation to a total of 3 people, and was given a short-term disability payments, with back pay, for exactly when they put me on leave. I'd rather have my paycheck and insurance stick around for a while, despite Walmart and Sedgwick being idiotic. I quit Walmart after having gotten holiday employment with Target for 2 months at that point. Don't bother me unless it's an emergency, posted by I Like the Quiet Zeppo. This morning, I got into my car and I realized that I left my headlights on. Thankfully, modern technology meant that it had automatically switched off when the key was removed, but it reminded me of a time where that wasn't so. Many, many years ago, I was working one of my first jobs in a little cafe, nearing the end of my training period. It was a quiet day, perfect to put the newbie on with only one experienced staff member. The experienced staff member called in sick. Boss had to come in and cover until Sue could come in early. Boss wanted to use the time on site to do paperwork out the back. "I'll be in here if you have any questions." I very annoyingly had a lot of questions. How to void an incorrect transaction, where to find more special paper for the credit card machine, what to do when the coffee grinder stopped working, and so on. Finally, boss said, "I'm busy. Don't bother me unless it's an emergency. Let me know when Sue is here." Shyly, I replied, "That's just what I came to tell you. Sue just arrived." "Great. Any more questions? Just ask her." Sue took over the coffee area and got me on restocking, clearing tables, and emptying the bins and other necessary grunt work. I went out to the outside bins through the little staff parking area and saw my boss's old car there with the headlights still on. I went back to my boss's office. Boss, is it an emergency?" Boss snapped. "Not to me," I replied. "Then go away." I left quickly. I went to tell Sue instead. Sue, and then I changed my mind. Boss doesn't want to be disturbed unless it's an emergency, so I'm supposed to ask you if I have more questions. Sue and I worked pleasantly until the end of my shift a few hours later. As I gathered my things to leave, Boss ran by me, knocking into me a bit. Without turning around to see if I was okay, boss said, "Sorry, I'm in a rush." I slowed down to see what happened next, getting out my brick of a phone to text my mother that I was on my way home. I could hear my boss swearing. "OP!" Oh no. Boss realized that what I was going to tell them earlier, and I was in trouble. "Can you bring your car in and give me a jump start? My battery is flat." Now only a few cars could fit, so only senior staff and management could park there. I walked here. I live 10 minutes of a walk up the hill. I raced off before boss could blame me. The next time I was on shift with Sue, I asked what happened to boss. "Well, headlights got left on. He got a flat battery. Boss tried to jump start it with my car, but it didn't work. Had to call a taxi." Funny that neither of us noticed the lights were on when we walked by it. And I realized, of course, she had to have seen it when she walked in. I can only imagine why she didn't say anything either. This story is completely wild, and I had a lot of fun with the voices for it, so I hope you enjoy. Do your job. Okay, Karen, posted by Not the Golden Child 616. So I work in online fulfillment at a large home, garden, and building supply store. Mysterious. My job title comes into play later, as technically we aren't supposed to work with customers directly, just point them in the right direction or find another associate who works in that department. I had a massive order to grab, several heavy and large pieces of sheet metal and screws. Problem is, the sheet metal size I need isn't where it's meant to be, so I'm having to scan pretty much, everything to figure out what's what. Bigger problem? This lingering in the wild sadly put me at a range of a wild Karen attack. Wild Karen in a raging harpy voice says, "Are you going to help me or not?" I'm suddenly very confused looking at her, especially as she hasn't spoken to me at all. She says, increasingly annoyed, "Well, I've been standing over there forever and you haven't offered to help me." I say, my bad, I can try? I don't work in this department, so it depends if." Suddenly actively hostile Karen says, "Try? Ugh, no, you will. It doesn't matter if you work in this department or not." I'm taking calming breaths so I don't lash back, wondering what this woman's problem is. Okay, what do you need?" Definitely unable to control annoyance in my tone as this woman is yelling at me. "This!" I'm not joking when I say she proceeds to suddenly pull out a screw and nearly stab me in the eye, shoving it towards me. I push her hand away, feeling much less calm as I have PTSD reactions to people putting hands in my face, much less of a freaking screw. Now I'm visibly shaking. "Okay, ma'am, screws are at the end of the aisle, on the left." "What? I already know that." I'm angrily replying, "Oh, okay, what size is that? What size do you need?" Even angrier, Karen replies, "You tell me." She takes a step closer as if she's trying to seem threatening. I'm unable to hold back and say, "I have no clue, ma'am. There is an entire wall of screws. It's impossible for me to tell the size just by looking at it." "You will not come at me like that." She says me like she's some royal and I should feel afraid. "Your manager would not like that." I no longer give two craps, and I say, "You think? Well, I could get a manager if you'd like. Maybe one of them can identify the screw by sight." "Don't make me mad today. Just do your job." Cue what could count as malicious compliance. I realized that I'd already told her exactly where that product is that she needed and where it would be located. "Yes, ma'am." I walked away from her to my trolley and proceeded to continue looking for the items on my order. "What are you doing?" "Doing my job." What was funny was, an aisle over, one of our assistant managers actually was nearby, with Karen ranting and stomping like a toddler. I walked over when I noticed him and told him that I had two issues. One, can't find the item, and two, I got a Karen that he may want to talk to. He laughed and showed me where the correct size sheet metal improperly was and totally ignored her, same as I was, until she huffed loudly and stormed away. I don't think she liked that my manager did like how I handled the situation. A few years ago when I was doing my undergrad, I was in a 300 level marketing class. In the beginning of this class, we were assigned groups that we were supposed to work together throughout the semester. We were to put together a marketing proposal for a local professional sports team and pitch it to them as part of our final grade. Every topic we were learning in class was to be directly applied to our marketing strategy, and the whole semester our professor would basically walk us through from beginning to end on how to put it together. So early on, we divvied up roles for each person. One person does market analysis, another person does the most applicable marketing strategies, another person does budgeting, and so on. There were about 7 people in our group, so plenty of help to be had for the different parts of the project. Or there should have been, at least. We would meet up weekly, and early on, a lot of it was just kind of roundtable discussion about what direction we wanted to take it. But as the semester went on, we started to notice some people were falling behind a bit. Each person falling behind apologized and assured us that they would get all they needed to be done when it was due. They were just swamped with other projects and classes and bullcrap. Come the final week, when we were to put all of our separate parts together and make it all mesh, guess what? They hadn't done jack crap all semester. They might have had a couple of bullet points on their subject, but it was far from a completed project and basically something any middle schooler could have lined out. 1, they are a professional sports team, and 2, there are no other professional sports teams of this sport in the state. 3, they have a large stadium, and so on. I was ticked. I and a few others in the group had spent a lot of time doing the research and putting it all together in a presentable form that was sure to impress not only my professor, but the marketing team of the affiliated sports group. The other reliable members of my group and I spent a lot of late nights working together to cover for the other teammates' lazy butts. But alas, it was too little too late, and we were not going to be able to submit something presentable by the deadline, and I sure as heck didn't want a bad grade for the amount of work that I put in, for not only my portion, but for the portions of those who didn't do anything. I met with my professor during her office hours and asked for a deadline extension, to which she replied, "Absolutely not. I made you aware of this project on day 1 of the semester, so you have quite literally had all semester to work on this. Why would you fall short of the deadline and need an extension?" I explained the situation to the professor, who graciously understood what I had gone through. She asked me to provide a list of all the members of my team, exactly what and how much to the project they had contributed, and gave us an additional 24 hours to submit what we could. She said that she would take what I had told her into consideration. Come the day of the presentation, our professor was walking around with the marketing professionals that we were to present to, and I think she was listening closely to each person's part of the presentation to verify what I had told her. Some of us knocked it out of the park on our portions, others very quickly glanced over the topics. It was evident who was a contributor and who was a leech. About a week later, once final grades were posted, our team group chat was flooded with "WTF, I thought we had a great marketing proposal, but that witch gave me an F for it" type messages from a few of the members. I got an A in the class. I won it for this price, posted by Blue Ellen. These past days have been bad for me, so enjoy these 2 stories told to me by my coworkers about Karens who they think they are in charge of the store. Story 1. My coworker, Maddie, was busy doing the self-checkout when a lady rings up an $84 ice maker. Immediately, the Karen calls Maddie over. She says, "So they said that since I got this from the top shelf, I can have it for half off." Maddie says, "Who said this?" Karen vaguely points to the man cash registers. They did." Maddie says, let me check the price." And of course, it rings up for full price. "Ma'am, this is coming up full price." "They said I could have it half off." Maddie then goes to a cashier at the register and asks about it. Other coworkers said, "Oh yeah, I got it down for her, but I never said anything about half off. She can pay full price or not at all." Maddie informed the Karen, who, of course, was ticked off and refused to buy it. Story 2. Now, there's retail price, what customers pay, and unit price, which is just for the store. Honestly, I never noticed it, and it plays absolutely no part in a customer's transaction. Now, usually the unit price is several cents, but like I said, it has no bearing in a customer's transaction. But this lady saw the unit price and thought she found such an amazing loophole. Karen brings up an item that rings up for $26. She said, "I know it says $26, but the unit price is 86 cents, and I want it for that price." Cashier says, "No, you can't have it for the unit price. You can have it for the price that rings up." "No, it's on the price tag. It says 86 cents. You have to honor it." The unit price is for the store, it's not for customers. The price is $26, and that's also on the tag. Karen then just devolves into a fit, causing the manager to come. He actually was so fed up with Karen that he pulled out his phone, looked up the definition of unit price, and read it out to her. She realized she was beaten after that and stormed off, not buying anything. Also had a lady who stood around for over 15 minutes to complain to a manager because there wasn't enough cashiers and she had to wait in line. The HOA demands that I follow their rules, but I'm not even in the HOA. Click the video on your screen so you don't miss the fallout of this one, and I will see you there.